You ever notice how, like, to really get something, to
Yeah.
really understand it, you got to explain it to somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what if that somebody else is, well, a genius?
Ooh,
We're
okay.
not talking dumbing things down, not even close.
Right.
More like peeling away all the fluff, getting to that core idea, the elegant simplicity that maybe even the smartest folks haven't quite grasped yet.
Yeah, I like that.
That's what we're after today on this deep dive. And it's especially for you, our listener, who loves that kind of deep understanding.
Absolutely, for the intellectually curious out there.
Exactly. And today we're diving into something really big, life itself.
Ah, yes, the big questions.
Yeah, we've got this amazing book as our guide, The Coming of Age of Quantum Biology.
A fascinating read. The authors, John Joe McFadden, a biologist, and Jim Al-Khalili, a
It's
physicist,
a real dream team, huh?
they really are. And they've talked to the top minds in the field. What they present is a way to see life's mysteries from a whole new angle.
And what's really mind-blowing is the sheer scale. Like, it's not just one weird biological trick. It's the underlying stuff that makes everything tick. From, like, how a robin knows where to fly,
Thousands of miles.
right, to the crazy dance of enzymes in our cells.
Yeah.
Even the very start of life itself.
It's all connected, and the surprising link, the key to understanding it all, lies in this, well, let's be honest, often pretty strange world of quantum mechanics.
Quantum mechanics and life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a combo I didn't see coming.
It's an intriguing intersection, to say the least. Let's start with a question that's probably as old as humanity itself. What really separates the living from the non-living? What is that spark, that essence?
Yeah, that's the big one, isn't it?
Aristotle, way back when, talked about a soul, right?
Okay.
Ancient culture spoke of chi, this life force.
Right.
Maybe not scientifically accurate in the modern sense, but they point to something we all kind of feel deep down.
Like, there's got to be more to life than just,
Yeah.
stuff.
Precisely. But then along came the more mechanistic view. The idea that life, with all its amazing complexity, is basically super advanced chemistry and physics. Thinkers like Boltzmann, they focused on how tons and tons of molecules act together.
Right. The statistical side of things.
And that view got a huge boost when DNA was discovered. Avery, Watson, and Crick Franklin, they showed us this elegant double helix,
DNA, the blueprint of life.
holding the instructions of heredity in its code.
Like a super complex instruction manual.
It seemed like, boom, proof that life is just about chemicals and physics. But even with that discovery, that question kept nagging, what really disappears when we die?
If not a soul, then what? What's fundamentally gone?
A profound question. Even with Craig Venter's amazing work, he created what they called synthetic life, right?
Yeah, I remember that. Big news.
But what he really did was take an existing bacterium and basically swap out its DNA with a lab-made version. Amazing engineering, but not making life from scratch. More like rewriting the software on a computer.
So, like, vitalism, the idea of a separate life force, that might be outdated. But still, we can't shake the feeling that life's got something truly special, something unique.
And perhaps this is where quantum mechanics comes in. This huge shift in thinking that showed us the, well, frankly, bizarre rules of the very, very small.
Yeah, quantum mechanics. It always kind of messes with my head.
It started with Max Planck. He threw everyone a curveball when he said energy isn't smooth and continuous. It comes in these little packets, these quanta.
Okay, so energy's got these, like, set amounts. It can't just be any amount.
Exactly. Then Einstein took it further. He showed that light itself, which we usually picture as a wave,
Right. Ripple in a pond.
can also act like these particles, these photons, these little packets of energy. That's what we call wave-particle duality.
Hmm.
First hint that reality, at its most fundamental level, doesn't play by the rules we're used to.
It's like the universe is playing tricks on us. Am I a wave or a particle?
Hmm.
You decide.
Something like that. And then Niels Bohr came along and really shook things up with his model of the atom. Electrons, he said, orbit the nucleus, but only at certain very specific energy levels.
Okay, so not just any old orbit.
Nope. Think of it like the staircase. Electrons can only be on the steps, not in between. That's quantization.
So electrons are picky about where they hang out. They've got their favorite energy levels.
In a way, yes. But here's the head scratcher. Why don't these electrons just spiral into the nucleus, losing energy all the way down, like classical physics says they should?
Good question. If they're losing energy, shouldn't they crash and burn, so to speak?
That's what you'd think. But they don't. Bohr's model with these quantized energy levels provided a part of the answer. But it was still a puzzle.
Right. So we had this new model, but it was still a bit of a mystery.
Absolutely. Then along came Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. This is a big one. It says there's a limit to how accurately we can know certain things about a quantum particle at the same time, like its position and momentum, how fast it's going, and in what direction.
So, like, if we know exactly where it is, we can't know how fast it's moving.
Exactly. The more you nail down one, the fuzzier the other gets.
Okay, that's just weird.
And then there's Schrödinger's wave equation, another way to describe this quantum craziness. It says, forget about picturing the electron like a tiny ball with an exact location. Instead, think of it as a wave spread out over space, described by this thing called a wave function.
So, two completely different ways of looking at the quantum world, but both are right. That's trippy.
It is. Schrödinger's wave function doesn't tell us exactly where the electron is. It gives us probabilities, a map of where it's most likely to be if we try to measure it.
So, at the smallest level, reality is all about probabilities, not certainties.
That's quantum mechanics for you. It's a very different picture than the clockwork universe of classical physics. And it was against this backdrop, this whole revolution in physics, that a new way of looking at biology emerged.
Okay, so how does this all tie back to life?
Well, some called it the organicist view. It was a kind of middle ground between that old idea of a separate life force and the pure mechanism view.
A compromise.
Sort of. People like Ludwig von Bernoulli, they said, okay, life might have these emergent properties, things you don't see just by looking at the individual parts.
The whole being greater than the sum of its parts.
Exactly. But they believed these properties could still be explained by the laws of physics and chemistry, even if we hadn't discovered those laws yet.
And did quantum mechanics play a part in this new way of thinking?
Pascal Jordan, a brilliant physicist, was really into this. He was one of the first to dive into what we now call quantum biology.
Oh, wow. So this field has been around for a while.
Longer than you might think. Jordan had this idea called amplification theory. He said tiny quantum events happening inside the molecules of a living thing could get amplified.
So something super small could have a big effect.
Yes, enough to change the whole organism.
That's mind-blowing.
Now, the book does point out a dark side to his story. His ideas were, unfortunately, twisted and used by the Nazis for their awful ideology. It's a reminder that even good science can be misused.
Yeah, that's a sobering thought. But let's get back to the science itself. So we had Jordan and his amplification theory. What came next in this quantum biology story?
Well, then came Erwin Schrödinger, the guy behind the wave equation. He wrote this hugely influential book, What is Life? It provided a key insight into how life might be using quantum mechanics to its advantage.
Okay, so what do you say?
He pointed out that those statistical laws of classical physics, the ones that work so well for describing huge groups of particles.
Yeah, like a gazillion molecules in a glass of water.
Exactly. Well, those laws start to break down when you get down to the tiny numbers of atoms and molecules that are really important in living things.
So life's playing by a different set of rules.
It seems that way. Schrödinger was basically saying life is super sensitive to how matter behaves at this fundamental quantum level.
So it's not just using the building blocks of matter, it's using the quantum weirdness of those blocks too.
Precisely. And now, let's talk about those amazing molecular machines, the engines that keep all life running. Enzymes.
Oh yeah, enzymes. Those protein workhorses that speed up all the chemical reactions in our bodies.
And in every living thing, really. We usually think of them in terms of that lock and key model.
Right, like a perfect fit. The enzyme grabs onto a specific molecule and helps it react.
A nice simple picture.
Yeah.
But the coming of age of quantum biology digs a little deeper. They talk about transition state theory. Think about a chemical reaction needing to overcome a hump, an energy barrier to get going, like pushing a ball up a hill.
Gotcha, you got to put in some energy to get that ball rolling.
Exactly. Catalysts, including enzymes, make that hill smaller. They lower the energy barrier, making it easier for the reaction to happen.
So enzymes make it easier for the ball to roll down the hill.
More like they smooth out the path so the ball doesn't have to go up such a steep hill in the first place.
I see, like giving the ball a shortcut.
Precisely. Now here's where the quantum magic comes in.
Okay, hit me with it.
Quantum tunneling. Picture that ball in the hill again. Quantum mechanics says there's a tiny but real chance that ball could just pass right through the hill without going over.
What, like a ghost ball? Going through solid matter?
It does sound crazy. But at the quantum level, particles like electrons can sometimes tunnel through energy barriers that would be impossible according to classical physics. It's a secret passage that classical physics doesn't know about.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. Give me an example, like in a real living thing.
A classic example is electron transfer in cellular respiration. It happens in the mitochondria, the powerhouses of our cells. They produce ATP, the energy currency of life. Scientists did experiments at super low temperatures, and guess what? Electrons were still zipping between molecules, even though there wasn't enough energy for them to overcome the energy barrier the normal way.
So they had to be tunneling, right?
Exactly. It's one of the strongest pieces of evidence for quantum tunneling in living things. And remember, electrons aren't just tiny balls, they also act like waves.
Right, that whole wave-particle duality thing.
And waves can do things that particles can't, like spread out and pass through barriers.
Okay, so electrons are sneaky little quantum ninjas. What about other particles? Do they tunnel too?
Protons do. The book talks about proton tunneling in certain reactions. One way we know it's happening is that the reaction rate doesn't change much with temperature, just like with those electron experiments. It's like, imagine you're riding a bike uphill. A heavier bike, well, it's going to react differently to that hill than a lighter one, right?
Makes sense.
In reactions, different isotopes are like bikes of different weights. If the rate doesn't change as expected when you swap isotopes, it could be a sign that the particles are tunneling, basically bypassing the energy hill altogether.
So these essential processes keep us alive. They're not just following classical chemistry. Quantum mechanics is right there in the mix.
It's a fundamental part of the story. Now, how about we move on to another incredible biological feat? Photosynthesis, the way plants and some microbes capture sunlight and turn it into energy.
The basis of pretty much all life on Earth.
It seems so simple, right?
Yeah.
Sunlight in, sugars out. But there might be a lot of quantum complexity going on under the hood.
Quantum mechanics in plants. Now that's something I never learned in school.
Initially, there was a lot of pushback against the idea of quantum mechanics playing a big role in photosynthesis.
Why was that?
Well, some people started tossing around the idea that plants were like quantum computers, which, to a lot of physicists, sounded a little too out there.
Plants as quantum computers. That does sound a bit far-fetched.
It was a bit of a stretch. But the main reason for skepticism was this thing called decoherence.
Decoherence. That rings bell.
Remember that wave function, how particles can be in multiple states at once? Well, that's called superposition.
Right, like in that famous double slit experiment, where a particle can go through two slits at the same time.
Exactly. But here's the thing. Superposition is super fragile. Even the slightest interaction with the environment can disrupt it, causing the wave function to collapse into a single state. That's decoherence.
So, like, the quantum weirdness disappears?
Pretty much. And inside a living cell, it's warm, it's wet, there's all sorts of stuff bumping around. Physicists thought decoherence would happen almost instantly, way too fast for quantum effects to matter for biology.
So, too much noise for the quantum music to play.
You could say that, but as always, nature's full of surprises.
What do you mean?
Let's break down how photosynthesis works. Inside chloroplasts, the energy factories in plant cells, light is absorbed by pigment molecules like chlorophyll. These molecules are organized into these structures called light harvesting complexes.
So chlorophyll's like the antenna catching the sunlight.
Exactly. When a photon hits a chlorophyll molecule, it bumps an electron up to a higher energy level. That creates what we call an exciton, a little packet of energy.
Okay, so the energy from the light is now stored in this excitant.
And that excitant needs to be transported to the reaction center, where the real magic happens, the conversion of light energy into chemical energy.
So the excitant has to travel a certain distance.
And it has to do it fast and efficiently, or the energy gets wasted.
So what happens next?
Here's where it gets really interesting. In 2007, Graham Fleming and his team discovered something remarkable: quantum beating. They saw these oscillations, like a back and forth, in the energy transfer within the light harvesting complexes.
Oscillations, like a wave going up and down.
Exactly. It was a sign that those excitons weren't just bouncing randomly from one chlorophyll molecule to the next. They were doing something much cooler.
Okay, spill it. What were they doing?
They were taking quantum walks.
Quantum walks. You're going to have to explain that one.
Imagine you spill a glass of water on a bar floor. The water doesn't just flow in one direction, right?
No, it spreads out everywhere.
That's like a classical random walk. But with a quantum walk, it's like the water is exploring all possible paths at the same time, finding the fastest way to reach the edge of the bar. That's what those excitons are doing, finding the most efficient way to reach the reaction center.
So it's like they're taking advantage of the quantum weirdness to do their job better.
Exactly. It's way more efficient than just hopping around randomly. And get this. These quantum beats, this evidence for quantum coherence, they've been found in all sorts of photosynthetic organisms, from bacteria to algae to spinach.
Good old spinach.
And at temperatures that life thrives in. meaning living things have figured out ways to harness and maintain this delicate quantum behavior even in the messy world of a cell.
So life is playing with quantum mechanics to make photosynthesis super efficient.
Yeah.
Amazing. But what about other abilities? What about things like animal navigation and smell?
Those are mysteries that have puzzled scientists for a long time, but there are hints that quantum mechanics might be involved there too.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Take the monarch butterfly. It migrates thousands of miles across multiple generations. Or the European robin, pinpointing its location with incredible accuracy.
And we know robins use Earth's magnetic field as a compass.
Right, they even have an inclination compass, sensing the angle of the Earth's magnetic field lines. But how they actually detect the magnetic field has been a long-standing puzzle.
So what's the quantum explanation?
Klaus Schulten proposed this radical idea called the radical pair hypothesis. He said, light hitting the robin's eye triggers the formation of these pairs of molecules called free radicals, and their electrons become quantum entangled.
Entangled. Now, that's a word that screams quantum weirdness.
It's probably the weirdest thing in quantum mechanics. Two particles linked in this way that they share the same fate no matter how far apart they are. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance because it seems to break the rules of how information can travel.
So Schulten was saying this spooky action is happening inside a robin's eye, helping it navigate.
That was his idea, a bit out there, but the evidence is starting to add up.
Okay, but how would it actually work?
The key seems to be a protein called cryptochrome. It's found in the eyes of lots of animals like birds and fruit flies, and we know it responds to light. Schulten and his colleagues figured out that within the cryptochrome molecule, light can trigger these entangled electrons in an amino acid called tryptophan.
Tryptophan. Isn't that the stuff in turkey that makes you sleepy?
That's the one. But in the robin's eye, it's part of this quantum compass. These entangled electrons, they're in a superposition of spin states. Think of it like they're both spinning up and down at the same time.
Okay, so another quantum superpower. But how does that help the bird find its way?
This superposition is super sensitive to magnetic fields, even weak ones like Earth's. And depending on which way the bird is flying, this delicate balance of spin states gets tilted.
Tilted.
Not like a seesaw. This, in turn, affects the chemical reactions happening in the eye, and ultimately the brain gets a signal. It's like, hey, we're tilted this way. Adjust course.
So it's all about how these entangled electrons react to the magnetic field.
That's the idea. It's still a hot area of research, but there's been some cool experimental evidence. They've even found these little blips in the data that seem to fit with the theory.
Wow. So something as seemingly straightforward as a bird migrating could be using some of the most mind-bending physics we know of. What about our sense of smell? Could that be quantum too?
There's a fascinating theory about that. It's called the vibrational theory of olfaction, and it was proposed by Luca Turin.
Okay, tell me more.
He said, we smell things not just because of the shape of molecules fitting into receptors in our nose, but also because of how those molecules vibrate.
So it's like each molecule has its own unique scent song.
You could say that. And Turin thinks quantum tunneling might be involved in how those vibrations are detected by our olfactory neurons.
Quantum tunneling in our noses. I never would have guessed.
Right. He's got some interesting evidence. For example, there are these sulfur hydrogen and boron hydrogen compounds. The shapes are super different, but they smell similar, like rotten eggs.
Ugh, not a pleasant smell.
No. But it turns out they also have similar vibrational frequencies.
So, same vibes, same smell.
Exactly. The book mentions experiments where they took fruit flies and messed with the vibrations of scent molecules by swapping out hydrogen atoms with heavier deuterium atoms.
So, slightly different versions of the same molecule.
Right. And guess what? The fly's ability to smell those altered molecules changed.
So even tiny changes in how a molecule vibrates can mess with our sense of smell.
And that suggests quantum tunneling, with its sensitivity to tiny energy differences, could be a key player in olfaction.
Wow. So we're seeing these hints of quantum mechanics in all sorts of unexpected places in biology. But the book goes even further, right? It talks about quantum mechanics in genes and the origin of life itself.
It does touch on those topics, the idea that even the genetic code in DNA, with its precise base pairing, might have some quantum underpinnings.
So the very blueprint of life might be quantum.
It's a possibility. There's this idea proposed by a scientist named Loden that the genetic code is written in quantum letters. He was talking about proton tunneling, that same quantum trick we were talking about earlier.
Right, the particles passing through energy barriers.
He suggested it could happen within DNA and maybe even influence mutations.
So random changes in our genes could be due to quantum mechanics. That's wild.
It's a very intriguing idea. And then there's the ultimate question: how did life itself begin? How do we go from this primordial soup of chemicals to, well, us?
The mystery of abiogenesis.
Scientists have been trying to create life in the lab for decades, even something as simple as a self-replicating RNA molecule. And it's proven to be incredibly difficult.
So creating life from scratch is harder than it looks.
Much harder. It makes you wonder if we're missing a key piece of the puzzle. And maybe quantum mechanics holds the answer.
Could quantum mechanics be the secret ingredient in the recipe for life?
It's a fascinating possibility. The book ends on this really interesting note. They talk about how molecular vibrations, which we usually think of as causing decoherence, that pesky noise that messes up quantum coherence.
Right, the quantum buzzkill.
Well, it turns out they might actually be helping to maintain coherence in some systems, like those photosynthetic complexes we were talking about.
So vibrations, the supposed enemy of quantum coherence, could actually be helping it.
It's a pretty radical idea, but the research is starting to point in that direction. It suggests a deeper connection between life and quantum mechanics than we ever imagined.
So we've gone on quite a journey today. From enzymes to photosynthesis, bird navigation to smell, even genes, and the origin of life itself.
It's a whole new way of looking at biology.
It really is. It's like we always thought life was amazing, but now it's like, whoa, it's even more amazing. It's using quantum mechanics.
It's that aha moment, right? All these things that seem like magic, maybe they're not magic after all.
Just really, really advanced quantum engineering.
Life has found ways to tap into this fundamental level of reality, this hidden layer of the universe, and it's led to all these incredible abilities.
So what do you think for our listeners out there? What's the big takeaway?
If life is playing by these quantum rules, then that opens up a whole new universe of possibilities. It makes you wonder about things like consciousness,
Whoa, yeah.
about the origin of life itself,
Mm.
and about what incredible bio-inspired technologies we might be able to create if we can really understand how life does it.
It's like we're just scratching the surface of what's possible. So for anyone who wants to dive deeper into all this quantum biology goodness, where should they start?
The Coming of Age of Quantum Biology by McFadden and Al-Khalili is an awesome place to begin. It's a clear, engaging read, even if you're not a scientist.
And there's a whole world of research out there to explore, so keep that curiosity burning, folks. And thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We can't wait to see what we uncover together next time.